I asked 100 strangers on the internet, what is the world's most beautiful language? And this is what they said. As a professional language instructor, people's attitudes and perceptions in regard to languages are extremely important to me. For this reason, I went online and asked 100 strangers a few questions. I am well aware that this is not a scholarly study that provides a true reflection of the world in terms of population. After all, this is just using one website full of people who can speak English and are willing to answer a stranger's questions on live video. Not to mention that a size of 100 is way too small of a sample. Nevertheless, this survey was a lot of fun to carry out and it did help me draw a few conclusions. I hope that it provides something valuable to you as well. The questions were, where are you from? This question is really easy for many to answer, but it does have different meanings for different people. I tried to make sure that the person answered with the best definition that matched their identity. Where do you live? This question is as relevant as the first, since the place where people live usually does have an influence in their opinions, right? What is your native language? I often needed to clarify what this means, so I added the language that you learned from your parents to make sure that I was getting the answer that I wanted. Which languages have you learned, even if it's just a little bit? My intention was to find out which languages each person was really familiar with. I wanted to see if their opinions were based on familiarity. What is the most beautiful language you can think of? Here, I was really after that first language that popped in people's minds. Many people were taken by surprise and did not know what to answer. I also wanted them to define beautiful language in their own terms. For some, it was the sound, others it was the writing, and others it was the beautiful things that they could do with their favorite language. At any rate, I feel that this question is a simple indicator of languages that people have good, positive feelings about. What is the ugliest language you can think of? Just like the last question, the intention here was to find out which language people have negative feelings about. The results for this question were just as interesting. The survey interview process was done entirely by me in late November and December 2023. I did my best to get a wide variety of participants from countries all over the world. In the end, people from 46 different countries in every continent except Antarctica participated. 20 people said Spanish is the most beautiful. I guess my gut feeling here is pride. Speaking seriously now, my impression is that Spanish-speaking culture is simply in vogue currently. People love the music, the dancing, everything that they see in social media. The general public loves Hispanic celebrities, Shakira, Jennifer Lopez, Messi, and many more. The food is quite popular as well, from tacos to ceviche, tortilla de patata. People simply can't have enough. And Spanish is also a language that people are very familiar with. 57 people said that they learned it at some point in their lives. 16 people said English was the most beautiful, and I was not expecting that at all. At the same time, it does make sense since English is such a powerful and dominant language. And the world is flooded by English language media, to be honest. This fits into a topic I talked about in one of my videos, is English an easy language, where I posit that English isn't really an easy language, but instead it is perceived as easy because people practice it more, sometimes even without realizing it. I also got the impression that many participants wanted to migrate to English-speaking countries, so that probably makes them enjoy the language even more. 23 participants chose German as the ugliest, and I am not surprised at all. We've seen those memes where German seems to have words that are different than the other languages and so on. I have a couple of hypotheses for why people have such negative feelings about German. For one, German is often heard in World War II movies, so I imagine people associate it with some of the most negative moments in history. I also think the fact that most Germans speak English quite well means that many people are not willing to learn their language, and thus think of it as an undecipherable and overcomplicated mess that is just too hard. Ich liebe die deutsche Sprache und es ist wirklich schade, dass so viele Leute nicht zustimmen. 21 people simply didn't find any language ugly. This is great. I love that so many people don't really seem to have any negative feelings towards other languages. I must say, though, that a lot of participants did say they hated certain accents within their native language. Let's work on that, shall we? 1/3 of Spanish speakers said Spanish was the most beautiful. So not only are outsiders loving our language, but there seem to be very positive feelings about it within our own community. To be an Aguafiestas, though, the average number of languages that Hispanics were familiar with was 2.9. So there seems to be a tendency to not know too much besides English, Spanish, and perhaps a bit of another language. Podríamos mejorar ese número. 37.5 of my Arabic speakers said that French was the ugliest. I am a French teacher, so yeah, I love French, and I was quite surprised it didn't take the first place. Only 7 people considered French the most beautiful. Surprising as well was the fact that these Arabic speakers just seemed to hate it. It could have to do with tensions between the French people and Arabic speakers in and out of France. It could have to do with there being an imposition of the language in countries like Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Half of my Brazilian participants answered Chinese for ugliest. This seems to be a popular sentiment in many places, though. My hypothesis is that China is still the first image that pops in people's minds when they think of something foreign. If you're Hispanic, you may have heard your mom say, "Es que yo le estoy hablando a usted en chino o qué?" Yes, Mandarin is hard, but I think it's way harder in people's minds than in reality. 我喜欢普通话，我认为你应该学中文. The countries where people claimed to have learned at least 6 languages or more were Lebanon, Algeria, Hong Kong, Denmark, Netherlands, UK, USA, Sweden, Philippines, Germany, Greece, India, and Qatar. Unfortunately, none of these countries are in Latin America. It seems that most multilingual people live either in Europe or in Arabic-speaking countries. Special mention to Filipinos and Indians who have a good knowledge of English, their country's national language, and another language, and also another one on top of that. The big winner of the night is Spanish, but the variety of languages that people loved was quite large. 24 languages were mentioned as most beautiful. A couple people said Farsi, one said Icelandic, there was Cebuano, Korean, Polish. I'm glad people are appreciating the beauty of these languages, and I'm also happy that the beautiful column seems to contradict the ugly column quite a bit, especially with Arabic, which is such a loved and hated language at the same time. The evidence seems to point to the whole topic not being a subjective thing. Perceptions seem to come from our own prejudice, and it's something to keep in mind as language professionals.